They called her the ghost of Sterling Manor. For 3 years, she was the woman in the background, wearing last season's beige, pouring the tea, taking the insults. They thought she was weak. They thought she was nothing without the Sterling name. But the moment the ink dried on the divorce papers, the woman they knew vanished. 3 days later, the engines of a Gulfstream G700 screamed over the private airstrip at the Met Gala. When the doors opened, the press didn't just gasp. They went silent. Because the woman stepping onto the tarmac wasn't the rejected wife. She was the one who owned the plane, and she was here to burn their kingdom to the ground. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the loudest noise in the room. It was a rainy Tuesday in Manhattan, the kind of grey, soulless afternoon that makes the glass skyscrapers look like prison bars. In the conference room of Sterling & Kosa, on the 54th floor, the air conditioning was set to a freezing temperature, a deliberate tactic Liam Sterling used to unsettle his opponents. Today, however, his opponent was his wife, Nolan, and she didn't shiver. "Just sign on the dotted line, Nolan," Liam said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. He didn't even look at her. He was scrolling through emails on his phone, his thumb flicking impatiently. "I have a board meeting in 20 minutes. Let's not make this more pathetic than it needs to be." Nolan sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing a simple grey cardigan that had seen better days, and a skirt that hung loosely on her frame. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, unflattering bun. For 3 years this had been her uniform, invisible, modest, cheap. Beside Liam sat his mother, Eleanor Sterling. She was a woman made of Botox and malice, draped in a Chanel tweed suit that cost more than Nolan's entire childhood home. "Honestly, dear," Eleanor sneered, taking a sip of sparkling water. "Don't read the clauses. It's generous. Far more than a gold digger from Idaho deserves. You get the small apartment in Queens and a monthly stipend for a year. Take it and go before we change our minds." Nolan looked up. Her eyes, usually cast down in submission, were strangely clear today. "I don't want the apartment," she said softly. Liam finally looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh? Holding out for the penthouse?" "Nolan, we signed a prenup. You get what I give you. Don't try to play hardball. You don't have the leverage, and you certainly don't have the money for a lawyer who can beat mine." He gestured to the man beside him, Arthur Pendleton, the most vicious divorce attorney in New York. Arthur offered Nolan a pitying smile. "Mrs. Sterling, I advise you to sign. The offer expires when you leave this room." "I don't want the apartment," Nolan repeated, her voice steady, "and I don't want the stipend." The room went quiet. Liam frowned, confused. "Then what do you want?" Nolan reached into a tote bag, a frayed canvas thing that Eleanor had once called a grocery sack, and pulled out a single black pen. "I want a clean break. No alimony, no assets, no contact. I want my maiden name restored immediately, and I want a non-disclosure agreement stating that neither of us will discuss the marriage or the divorce for 5 years. Eleanor laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "She wants an NDA to protect her reputation? Oh, Liam, this is rich. She doesn't want anyone to know you dumped her." Liam chuckled, shaking his head. "Fine. If you want to leave with nothing, be my guest. It saves me $500,000. He signaled Arthur. "Draw up the waiver. She leaves with 0. It took 10 minutes for the paralegals to print the new addendum. During that time, Liam took a call from Sophia, his assistant, though everyone in New York knew she was much more than that. "Yes, baby," Liam whispered into the phone, not bothering to lower his voice. I'll be done soon. The trash is taking itself out. Book the table at Le Bernardin for 8 francs. Nolan heard every word. She didn't flinch. She simply stared at the mahogany table, tracing the grain of the wood with her eyes. She remembered the day she met Liam. She had been interning at a charity gala, wearing a borrowed dress. He had been charming then. He had told her he loved her simplicity, her grounding presence. It had taken her 6 months of marriage to realize he didn't want a partner. He wanted a prop. He wanted a mousy, obedient wife to make him look stable to the board of directors while he lived his bachelor fantasies on the side. The papers slid across the table. Termination of marriage between Liam Alexander Sterling and Nolan Marie Vance. Nolan picked up the pen. She didn't hesitate. She signed her name with a flourish that didn't match her timid appearance. Nolan Vance. "Done," she whispered. She stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. "Leave the ring," Liam said coldly, his eyes back on his phone. Nolan paused. She looked at her left hand. The diamond was a 3-carat oval, impressive to the naked eye. But Nolan knew the truth. It was a conflict diamond, purchased at a discount from a dealer in Antwerp who didn't ask questions. Liam was cheap where it mattered. She slid the ring off her finger. It felt heavy, like a shackle. She placed it gently on the table. "Goodbye, Liam," she said. Yeah. He waved a hand dismissively. "Close the door on your way out." Eleanor didn't even look up from her Vogue magazine. "Don't expect a reference for your next job, dear. We don't recommend failures." Nolan walked to the heavy oak doors. She placed her hand on the cold brass handle. For a second, she looked back at the husband who had neglected her, the mother-in-law who had tormented her, and the lawyer who had mocked her. If you only knew, she thought. She opened the door and walked out. As the latch clicked shut, silence returned to the boardroom. "Well," Eleanor sighed, snapping her magazine shut. "That was easier than I thought. I expected tears. Begging." "She knows her place," Liam said, pocketing the ring. "She's a nobody. She'll be back in Idaho working at a diner within a month. Now, let's focus on the gala. I need to announce the merger with Vanguard Tech this weekend. It's going to make me a billionaire twice over." "Make sure Sophia wears something appropriate," Eleanor warned. "She's the future Mrs. Sterling now." Liam smiled. "Don't worry, Mother. Sophia knows how to shine. Unlike Nolan." Nolan walked out of the Sterling skyscraper and into the pouring rain. She didn't have an umbrella. Usually, this would be the part where the tragic heroine cries, the rain masking her tears. But Nolan wasn't crying. As the cold water hit her face, washing away the cheap foundation she wore to make herself look paler and more tired than she actually was, she felt something else entirely. She felt lighter. She walked 2 blocks down 5th Avenue, ignoring the honking taxis and the rushing pedestrians. She stopped in front of a black Lincoln Navigator, parked quietly in a loading zone. The moment she approached, the back door flew open. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, holding a large golf umbrella. He was older, with silver hair and eyes that held deep respect. "Ms. St. James," the man said, his voice low and professional. "Welcome back." Nolan ducked under the umbrella, sliding into the plush leather-back seat of the car. The warmth enveloped her immediately. "Thank you, Marcus," she said. Her voice had changed. The soft, tremulous whisper she had used for 3 years was gone, replaced by a smooth, commanding alto. "Is everything arranged?" Marcus closed the door and slid into the driver's seat. He looked at her through the rearview mirror. "The jet is fueled and waiting at Teterboro. The team is already on board, and your change of clothes is prepared." Nolan pulled the hair tie from her bun, shaking her head. Thick, lustrous waves of dark hair fell around her shoulders. She pulled a wet wipe from the console and scrubbed her face, removing the last traces of the Nolan Vance disguise. "How did it go?" Marcus asked as he pulled into traffic, maneuvering the heavy car with expert precision. "They signed," Nolan said, looking out the window at the building she had just left. "No alimony, no assets, and most importantly, an NDA preventing them from discussing the marriage." Marcus chuckled. "A masterstroke, Mum. They think they silenced you. They don't realize they just silenced themselves. They can't claim a connection to you once the news breaks." "That was the point," Nolan said. She pulled out a sleek, encrypted smartphone from a hidden compartment in the seat, a device that cost more than Liam's car. She dialed a number. "It's done," she said into the phone. "Activate Protocol Alpha." On the other end of the line, the voice of Julian Thorne, the CEO of Vanguard Tech, answered. "You're free?" "Legally and physically," Nolan replied. "Liam thinks he's announcing a merger with you at the gala this Saturday." "He thinks he's acquiring Vanguard," Julian laughed darkly. "He has no idea Vanguard is a subsidiary of Aurora Holdings." "And he has no idea," Nolan added, a cold smile touching her lips, "that the majority shareholder and chairwoman of Aurora Holdings is his ex-wife." Nolan St. James wasn't just a nobody from Idaho. That was a backstory crafted by one of the best intelligence firms in the world. In reality, Nolan was the granddaughter of Elias St. James, the shipping and steel magnate who had built an empire in the 1950s. When her parents died in a plane crash, she had inherited everything at 18. But she had wanted to know if love was real. She wanted to know if someone could love her without the billions, without the fame, without the power. So she created Nolan Vance. She met Liam, a rising star in real estate, and thought she found it. She was wrong. "Take me to the airfield, Marcus," Nolan said, leaning back and closing her eyes. "We have 3 days to prepare for the Sterling Gala. I need a dress that stops hearts." "I took the liberty of calling Versace, Ma'am," Marcus said. "Donatella is flying in personally." Nolan smirked. "Good. Because on Saturday, I'm not just attending a party. I'm attending a funeral." The next 48 hours were a blur of transformation. While Liam Sterling was busy bragging to his golf buddies about how easily he had shed the dead weight of his wife, Nolan was in a penthouse in Monaco, overlooking the harbour. She sat in a chair while a team of 3 stylists worked on her. The grey cardigan was burned, literally in the fireplace. In its place came silk, velvet, and diamonds. "The skin has suffered a bit from stress," her esthetician tutted, applying a gold-infused serum. "But the bone structure, divine as always, Ms. St. James." "Fix it," Nolan commanded, reviewing a dossier on her tablet. "I need to look untouched by time or misery." On the screen, she was watching the stock prices of Sterling & Co. They were artificially high, inflated by the rumors of the Vanguard merger. Liam was leveraging everything, his properties, his reputation, his family trust, to buy Vanguard. He thought it was his ticket to the big leagues. He didn't know he was buying a Trojan horse. Ms. St. James, her assistant, Chloe, walked in, holding a garment bag that looked heavy. "The dress." Chloe unzipped the bag. The fabric shimmered like liquid midnight. It was a custom piece, designed to look like armor made of starlight. It was backless, daring, and screamed power. "It's perfect," Nolan said. "And the jewelry?" Chloe asked. Nolan stood up. "Open the vault." They walked to the wall safe. Inside sat the St. James parure, a necklace and earring set made of sapphires and diamonds that had once belonged to Russian royalty. It was worth $40 million. He called me a gold digger, Nolan whispered, running her fingers over the cold gems. He accused me of wanting his pathetic little apartment. She turned to the mirror. The reflection that stared back was not the mousy wife. It was a predator. "Let's go home," she said. The world knew about the jet before they knew about the woman. It was 6 p.m. on the night of the Met Gala. The theme was gilded glamour, a nod to the opulence of old New York. Outside the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the paparazzi were a sea of black tuxedos and flashing cameras, hungry for the next celebrity. But the real news was happening 10 miles away at Teterboro Airport. TMZ had broken the story first. A Gulfstream G700, the Rolls-Royce of the sky, worth $75 million, had just requested emergency clearance to land. The tail number didn't trace back to a corporation or a rental agency. It traced back to Aurora Holdings, a shadowy conglomerate known for swallowing tech companies whole. Inside the limousine approaching the Met, Liam Sterling watched the live feed on his phone. "Who cares about a plane?" Sophia whined, adjusting the strap of her bright red sequined gown. It was a little too tight, a little too loud, but she insisted it made her look like a movie star. "Liam, look at me. Am I glowing?" Liam glanced at her, then back at his phone. "It's not just a plane, Sophia. It's Aurora. Rumor has it the chairwoman is coming to New York. If I can get 5 minutes with her, I can secure the funding for the Vanguard merger without using the bank loans." Eleanor Sterling, sitting opposite them in the limo, adjusted her diamond choker. "Focus, Liam. Tonight is about cementing your status. You need to look like the king of New York. Sophia, stop fidgeting. You look adequate." Sophia scowled but stayed silent. She knew her place. She was the trophy, the upgrade from the boring, mousy Nolan. "We're here," Liam said as the car slowed. The Sterling trio stepped out onto the red carpet. The flashes erupted. Liam put on his best billionaire smile, waving to the crowd. He wrapped an arm around Sophia's waist, posing for the cameras. "Mr. Sterling, is it true the divorce is final?" a reporter shouted. "Completely," Liam shouted back, grinning. "I'm a free man, and Sterling & Co. has never been stronger." "When is the merger happening?" another yelled. "Watch the stage tonight." Liam winked. They moved up the stairs, basking in the attention. They felt untouchable. They were the royalty of the evening. And then the atmosphere shifted. It started as a murmur, a ripple of confusion that moved through the press pit. Photographers stopped taking pictures of Rihanna. Reporters stopped interviewing George Clooney. Everyone turned their heads toward the street. A convoy was approaching. It wasn't a limousine. It was a motorcade of 3 matte black SUVs with tinted windows, flanked by 2 NYPD motorcycle escorts. The crowd parted instinctively. This wasn't celebrity energy. This was head of state energy. "Who is that?" Sophia whispered, clinging to Liam's arm. "Is it the president?" Liam frowned. "I didn't hear about any political guests." The convoy stopped at the base of the stairs. The lead car's door opened, and 4 security guards, massive men with earpieces and stone faces, stepped out. They formed a perimeter. Then, the back door of the middle SUV opened. A leg stepped out. A stiletto heel, sharp enough to kill, hit the red carpet. The woman who emerged seemed to suck the oxygen out of the air. She was tall, statuesque, wearing a dress that defied description. It was a deep, midnight blue velvet that appeared black under the night sky, dusted with thousands of crushed sapphires that caught the camera flashes like stars. It hugged every curve, culminating in a dramatic train that flowed behind her like a shadow. Her hair was a cascade of dark waves. Her lips were painted a deep crimson. Around her neck sat the St. James parure. sapphires the size of quail eggs, dripping in diamonds. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply stood there, radiating a cold, terrifying power. The press pit went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then, chaos erupted. "Ms. St. James! Over here! Look left! Is it true you're buying New York?" Liam Sterling froze. He squinted. The woman looked familiar. The curve of the jaw, the shape of the eyes, but the posture, the arrogance. It was alien. "Who is she?" Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "That necklace. Liam, that necklace is worth more than our entire company." The woman began to walk up the stairs. She moved with a predator's grace. As she got closer, she locked eyes with the Sterling group waiting near the entrance. She didn't blink. Liam felt a cold sweat break out on his back. It can't be, he thought. It's impossible. She stopped 3 steps below them. The cameras were going wild, capturing the confrontation. "Nolan," Liam breathed, the name falling out of his mouth like a curse. Sophia laughed nervously. "Liam, are you crazy? That's not your mousy ex-wife. That's a goddess." The woman tilted her head slightly. She looked at Liam, then at Sophia, and finally at Eleanor. Her gaze was like a physical blow. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice was low, smooth, and utterly devoid of the stuttering timidity he remembered. "Nolan," Liam repeated, stepping forward, his face pale. What are you wearing? Who paid for this? You signed the papers. You have nothing." Nolan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I signed the papers to get rid of you, Liam, not my assets." "I don't understand," Eleanor stammered, clutching her pearls. "You're a nobody. You're from Idaho." "I was born in Zurich," Nolan corrected calmly. "And I spent my summers in Idaho because my grandfather liked the fishing. He found it grounding." "Grandfather?" Liam asked. "Elias St. James," Nolan said. The name hit Liam like a freight train. Elias St. James, the shipping magnate, the man who practically built the Atlantic trade routes, one of the wealthiest men of the 20th century. You're the heiress," Liam whispered. His knees felt weak. "I am the chairwoman," Nolan corrected. She stepped up the final stairs, towering over Sophia. She didn't even look at the mistress. She just brushed past her, the train of her dress sweeping over Sophia's feet. "Excuse me," Nolan said, not waiting for them to move. "I have a merger to discuss." She walked into the museum, leaving the Sterlings standing on the red carpet, open-mouthed, while the world's press captured the moment their empire began to crumble. The grand hall of the Met was a kaleidoscope of gold and flowers. Waiters circulated with trays of caviar and champagne. The air buzzed with gossip. The only topic of conversation was the mysterious woman in the midnight dress. Liam, Eleanor, and Sophia huddled in a corner near the bar. Liam was downing his 3rd scotch. "It's a lie," Eleanor hissed, though her face was grey. "She's lying. She hired an actor. She rented the jewelry. It's a prank to embarrass us." "She arrived in the Aurora jet, Mother," Liam snapped, losing his composure. "I checked the registry. The G700 is registered to Nolan St. James. I was married to a billionaire for 3 years, and I treated her like a maid." Sophia looked terrified. "Does this mean she's going to sue us?" "Worse," Liam said, watching the crowd part as Nolan walked through the room. "She's going to ruin us." He watched her. She was speaking with the mayor of New York. The mayor was laughing, nodding deferentially. Next, she moved to Julian Thorne, the CEO of Vanguard Tech, the company Liam was desperate to acquire. Julian greeted her with a bow, a literal bow. "I have to stop this," Liam said. He straightened his tie. "I have the leverage. I'm the CEO of Sterling & Co. Business is business. If she's really St. James, She'll respect a deal." He marched across the room, pushing past a supermodel and a duke. He approached the circle where Nolan and Julian stood. "Nolan," Liam said, putting on his boardroom voice, "we need to talk, privately." Nolan turned slowly. She held a crystal flute of water. "I have nothing to say to you, Liam. My lawyer handled everything on Tuesday. Remember? You wanted a clean break." "Cut the act," Liam hissed, lowering his voice. "You played me. That's fraud. You pretended to be poor." "I never said I was poor," Nolan replied coolly. "I said I lived simply. You assumed the rest because you're an arrogant snob who judges people by their labels. I wanted to see if you loved me. You failed that test spectacularly." "Fine," Liam spat. "The marriage was a sham. Whatever. But business is real. I'm announcing the merger with Vanguard tonight. Julian has agreed in principle. Don't let your personal feelings mess up $1 billion deal, Nolan. It's bad for the shareholders." Julian Thorne cleared his throat. He was a tall man with a sharp beard and eyes that twinkled with amusement. "Actually, Liam, about that." The music died down. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage. The event host, Anna Wintour, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "welcome. Before dinner is served, we have a special announcement regarding the future of New York's tech landscape. Please welcome the CEO of Vanguard Tech, Mr. Julian Thorne." "That's my cue." Liam grinned nervously. "He's going to call me up. Watch and learn, Nolan. You might have money, but I have the deal." Liam started walking toward the stage, expecting to be beckoned. Julian walked up to the podium. "Thank you," he said. "For months, there have been rumors about the future of Vanguard. We have been in talks with Sterling and Co. regarding an acquisition." Liam stopped near the stage, buttoning his jacket, ready to wave. "However," Julian continued, his voice echoing through the massive hall, "Vanguard values integrity, transparency, and long-term vision. Qualities we found lacking in our potential partners." Liam froze. The smile dropped from his face. "Therefore," Julian said, "I am pleased to announce that Vanguard has not been sold. Instead, Vanguard has acquired a new parent company. We have officially joined the Aurora Holdings portfolio." A gasp went through the crowd. "And," Julian gestured to the floor, "I would like to invite the chairwoman of Aurora Holdings to say a few words, the woman who made this possible, Ms. Nolan St. James." The spotlight swung wildly, searching the room until it landed on Nolan. She didn't look surprised. She handed her glass to a waiter and walked toward the stage. The applause started slowly, then built into a thunderous roar as people realized the drama unfolding. She walked past Liam. She didn't stop. She didn't look at him. She walked up the stairs, took the microphone from Julian, and stood alone in the center of the light. "Thank you, Julian," she said. Her voice was magnified, crisp and clear. "3 days ago," she began, looking out at the sea of faces, "I sat in a boardroom not far from here. I was told that I had no value. I was told that I should take a small settlement and disappear. I was told that power belongs only to those who shout the loudest." The room was deadly silent. Eleanor Sterling was hiding her face behind a napkin. Sophia was scrolling frantically through her phone, likely looking for a flight out of the country. "But true power isn't about shouting," Nolan continued. "It's about patience. Mr. Sterling." She pointed a gloved hand directly at Liam, who was standing frozen at the foot of the stage, bathed in the spillover light like a deer in headlights. Mr. Sterling spent the last 6 months leveraging his company's assets to fund a buyout of Vanguard. He put up his real estate, his intellectual property, and his personal stock as collateral for high-interest loans. She paused for effect. When Vanguard rejected his offer 5 minutes ago, those loans went into default. The clauses in his contracts state that in the event of a failed merger, the debt can be called immediately. She smiled, a small, terrifying curve of her lips. My company, Aurora Holdings, bought that debt this morning. All of it. The crowd gasped. The financial reporters in the room were typing furiously on their phones. Which means, Nolan said softly, I don't just own Vanguard. As of 8 p.m. tonight, I own Sterling & Co. She leaned into the microphone. Liam, you're fired. The silence in the Met was shattered by the sound of a glass breaking. Liam had dropped his scotch. For a moment, he couldn't move. The words, "You're fired," echoed around the cavernous hall, bouncing off the Egyptian artifacts and the vaulted ceilings. It felt like a physical slap, harder than any he had ever delivered to Nolan's self-esteem. Then, the denial set in. You can't do that, Liam screamed, his face turning a mottled shade of crimson. He lunged toward the stage, scrambling up the first 2 steps. Security! Get her off the stage! She's crazy! This is slander! 2 large men in black suits intercepted him before he could reach the podium. They weren't museum security. They wore silver lapel pins with the Aurora Holdings crest. Mr. Sterling, one of them said, his voice like grinding gravel. You are causing a disturbance. We have instructions to escort you off the premises. Get your hands off me, Liam thrashed, his tuxedo jacket ripping at the shoulder. I am Liam Sterling. I own this city. Nolan, tell them it's a joke. On stage, Nolan didn't flinch. She looked down at him with an expression of mild boredom, the way one looks at a bug that has flown into a glass of wine. You were Liam Sterling, the CAO, Nolan said into the microphone, her voice cool and amplified. Now, you are Liam Sterling, the liability. And as the majority shareholder, I have a fiduciary duty to remove incompetent management. She turned to Julian Thorne. Julian, shall we? After you, Madame Chairwoman, Julian said, offering his arm. They walked off the stage, descending the stairs on the opposite side, away from the screaming Liam. The crowd parted for Nolan like the Red Sea, but this time the expressions weren't just curious. They were terrified. They were looking at a woman who had just decapitated one of New York's golden boys in front of 500 witnesses without raising her voice. As Nolan disappeared into the VIP section, the reality of the situation crashed down on the Sterling family. Eleanor was standing by the bar, trembling. Her social circle, the wives of bankers and senators, had already taken a collective step away from her. The Sterling name, which had been a golden ticket 5 minutes ago, was now radioactive. Mrs. Sterling, a waiter approached her, holding a small silver tray with a bill on it. I'm afraid the credit card on file for your table was just declined. The bank has frozen the assets associated with the company account. Eleanor stared at the bill. It was for $12,000 of vintage champagne. Declined, she whispered. Do you know who I am? I know who you were, the waiter said, his face impassive. Meanwhile, near the exit, Sophia was frantically typing on her phone. She was trying to call an Uber, but the app was glitching. She looked up and saw Liam being dragged toward the door by security. Sophia! Liam yelled, spotting her. Sophia, call my lawyer! Call Arthur! Sophia looked at Liam, sweaty, red-faced, his jacket torn, humiliatingly powerless. Then she looked at the exit where the paparazzi were waiting like sharks. She put her phone in her purse. She turned her back on him and walked toward the ladies' room, disappearing into the crowd. She wasn't going to be photographed with a loser. The next morning, the sun rose over a different New York. At 8 a.m. sharp, a convoy of trucks arrived at the Sterling and Cumber headquarters. They didn't carry deliveries. They carried forensic accountants and security teams from Aurora Holdings. Nolan walked into the lobby. She was wearing a white power suit, sharp and pristine. She walked past the reception desk where she used to wait for hours just to bring Liam his lunch, lunches he would often throw in the trash because the salad was wilted. The receptionist, a young woman named Jessica, who had always been kind to Nolan, looked up in shock. "Good morning, Jessica," Nolan said, smiling warmly. "You can keep your job. In fact, you're getting a raise. But I need you to clear the executive floor. Immediately." "Yes, Miss St. James. Right away," Jessica stammered, hitting the intercom. Nolan took the elevator to the 54th floor. The doors opened to the same hallway she had walked down on Tuesday as a rejected wife. Liam was there. He had slept in his office. He was wearing yesterday's tuxedo shirt, unbuttoned and stained. He was frantically shredding documents. "It's too late for that," Nolan said, leaning against the doorframe. Liam jumped. He looked at the shredder, then at her. You witch. You planned this. You trapped me." "I didn't make you take out those loans, Liam," Nolan said, walking into the office. She ran a finger along the mahogany desk. "I didn't make you leverage your family trust. I didn't make you cheat on me. You did all of that yourself. I just waited for the bill to come due." "I'll sue you," Liam snarled. "I'll claim entrapment. I'll claim fraud." "Go ahead," Nolan said, "but you'll need a lawyer. And I spoke to Arthur Pendleton this morning. He's dropped you as a client. Apparently he doesn't work on contingency, and you can't afford his retainer anymore." Liam slumped into his chair. "What do you want, Nolan? You want me to beg? Is that it?" "Fine. I'm sorry." "Okay? I'm sorry I treated you like garbage. I'm sorry I cheated. Just don't take the company. It's my life." Nolan looked at him, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of emotion. It wasn't anger. It wasn't love. It was pity. "That's the problem, Liam," she said softly. "This company was your life. You have nothing else. No friends who aren't on your payroll. No family who doesn't want your money. You're hollow." She placed a single envelope on the desk. "This is the eviction notice for the penthouse. The company owns it, and I'm selling it. You have 24 hours to vacate." "Where am I supposed to go?" Liam whispered, his voice cracking. Nolan turned to leave. She paused at the door, looking back one last time. "I hear there's a small apartment in Queens available, and maybe, if you're lucky, you can get a monthly stipend. For a year." She closed the door. 2 weeks later. The scandal had dominated the news cycle for days, but the world moves fast. Sterling and Cumber was being dismantled and absorbed into the Aurora Empire. The ghost of Sterling Manor was now the Queen of Wall Street. Nolan was staying at her grandfather's old estate in the Hamptons, a sprawling oceanfront property that she had avoided for years because it brought back too many memories. Now, she was filling it with new ones. She sat on the veranda, drinking tea and reading a book. The ocean breeze was cool, but the sun was warm. "Ms. St. James?" Marcus appeared at the glass door. "You have a visitor at the gate. She says it's urgent." Nolan didn't look up. "If it's a reporter, tell them I'm busy." "It's not a reporter," Marcus said. "It's Eleanor Sterling." Nolan paused. She closed her book. "Let her in." 10 minutes later, Eleanor was escorted onto the veranda. The transformation was shocking. The Chanel suits were gone, replaced by a simple, off-the-rack dress. Her hair was pulled back, but the expensive dye job was fading. She looked older, smaller. She stood awkwardly near the railing, clutching her purse. "Nolan," Eleanor said. Her voice lacked its usual venom. It sounded brittle. "Eleanor." Nolan nodded, gesturing to a chair. "Sit." Eleanor sat down, gingerly. She looked out at the ocean. "It's beautiful here. I always knew the St. James family had taste, but I didn't know it was you. What do you want, Eleanor?" Nolan asked, cutting through the pleasantries. Eleanor took a deep breath. Tears welled up in her eyes. Real tears this time. "Liam is. He's in a bad way, Nolan. He's drinking. Sophia left him the night of the gala. He's living in a motel in Jersey. He won't talk to me." "I'm sorry to hear that," Nolan said, though her tone remained neutral. "I know we were difficult," Eleanor continued, her hands twisting her purse strap. "I know I was cruel to you. I thought you were just another girl trying to steal my son's money. I was trying to protect him." "You weren't protecting him," Nolan said sharply. "You were enabling him. You taught him that people are disposable. You taught him that status matters more than character." Eleanor flinched. "I know, and I've paid for it. The banks took the house. They took the cars. I'm staying with my sister in Ohio. I have nothing left." She looked up at Nolan, her eyes desperate. "I'm not asking for the company back. I know that's gone. But, please, is there anything you can do? Just a small settlement? Enough for Liam to get therapy? Enough for me to not live in a guest bedroom at 60 years old?" Nolan looked at the woman who had made her life hell. She remembered the insults, the way Eleanor would inspect the dust on the mantelpiece and blame Nolan, the way she had laughed when Nolan signed the divorce papers. Revenge was supposed to be sweet, but seeing Eleanor like this, broken, begging, just felt sad. Nolan reached for her checkbook. It was sitting on the table. Eleanor's eyes widened with hope. Nolan wrote a check. She tore it out and placed it on the table. "This is for you, Eleanor," Nolan said. "Not for Liam. Liam needs to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet for the first time in his life. If you give him a penny of this, I will know, and I will sue to get it back." Eleanor picked up the check. She looked at the amount. Her hand flew to her mouth. It was for $500,000. "This is—" Eleanor sobbed. "Why? After everything?" "Because," Nolan stood up, smoothing her dress. "Unlike you, I don't need to crush people to feel tall. Take the money. Go to Ohio. And never contact me again." Eleanor stood up. She looked like she wanted to hug Nolan, but she knew she had lost that right years ago. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're a better woman than I ever was." "I know," Nolan said. Marcus appeared to escort Eleanor out. Nolan watched her go. She watched the black car drive away down the long, winding driveway. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The final tie was cut. The anger was gone. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Julian. "Meeting with the board in 1 hour. We're discussing the new charity initiative. You ready?" Nolan smiled. She typed back, "I was born ready." She put the phone down, took a sip of her tea, and looked out at the horizon. The storm was over. The sun was shining, and Nolan St. James was finally, truly free. It is often said that a cornered animal is the most dangerous, but Liam Sterling wasn't an animal. He was a narcissist, and narcissists don't fight with claws, they fight with lies. 6 months had passed since the Met Gala. Nolan St. James had successfully rebranded Sterling & Co. into Aurora Vanguard, a green tech powerhouse. Her face was on the cover of Forbes and Time. She was dating Julian Thorne, a relationship kept quiet, but rumored to be serious. Liam, meanwhile, had been festering. He had been living in a rented condo in New Jersey, funded by the last scraps of his liquidated assets. He spent his days watching Nolan's success on TV and his nights drinking cheap vodka. The humiliation had curdled into a singular, obsessive need for revenge. He found his weapon in the form of Barry Glickman, a sleazy literary agent known for publishing tell-all books that ruined reputations. The news broke on a Monday morning. Page 6 ran the headline, "Sterling Speaks, the Secret Diaries of the Billionaire's Ex." Liam was releasing a memoir. In the leaked excerpts, he claimed Nolan was mentally unstable, that she had manipulated him into the marriage, and, most damaging of all, that she had illegally used insider information to orchestrate the takeover of his company. It was a pack of lies, but in the court of public opinion, the truth often matters less than the scandal. Barry Glickman had booked Liam for a prime-time exclusive interview with Anderson Cooper, a daring move to lend credibility to the lies to launch the book. Nolan was in her office in Manhattan when the news hit. Julian was pacing the floor. "We have to file an injunction," Julian said, his jaw tight. "If he goes on air and accuses you of insider trading, the SEC will have to investigate. Even if you're innocent, the stock price will tank. It's what he wants." Nolan sat behind her desk, staring at the photo of Liam in the newspaper. He looked gaunt, desperate, but his eyes held a manic gleam. "An injunction makes me look guilty," Nolan said calmly. "It looks like I'm trying to hide something." "So what do we do?" Julian asked. "Let him lie to millions of people?" Nolan tapped her pen against the desk. "No, we don't stop him. We let him talk. But we make sure he doesn't have the last word." Her intercom buzzed. "Ms. St. James, there is a woman in the lobby. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says she has something you need to see regarding Liam. She says her name is Sophia." Julian stopped pacing. "Sophia? The mistress?" Nolan's eyes narrowed. "Send her up." Sophia looked nothing like the girl in the red sequined dress. She wore jeans and a heavy coat. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing dark circles under her eyes. She looked young, scared, and tired. When she walked into the office, she hesitated, looking at Julian and then at Nolan. "I didn't think you'd see me," Sophia whispered. "I'm curious," Nolan said, remaining seated. "Why are you here? Last I saw, you were running out of the Met Gala to avoid the blast radius." Sophia flinched. "I left him that night. But I went back a week later. I didn't have anywhere to go. He promised he'd change. He said we could rebuild." She let out a bitter laugh. "He didn't change. He got worse. He started blaming me for everything. And when he started writing this book, he made me type it. He dictated the lies, and I typed them." "And?" Nolan asked. Sophia reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "He's not just lying about you, Nolan. He's lying about the money." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "What money?" "The insider trading accusation," Sophia explained quickly. "He's projecting. When he was CEO, Liam was funneling company money into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. He called it consulting fees. He hid it from the auditors, and he hid it from you. He's planning to use that money to flee the country after the book launch." Sophia placed the drive on the desk. "This contains the ledgers, the account numbers, the wire transfers. It's all there. Millions of dollars stolen from the shareholders." Nolan looked at the drive, then at Sophia. "Why give this to me? You could have blackmailed him." Sophia looked down, tears forming in her eyes. "Because I'm pregnant, and I don't want my child to have a father who is a criminal. And because you were the only one who told him the truth that night. You called him hollow. You were right." Nolan stood up. She walked around the desk. For a moment, Sophia braced herself, expecting a slap or an insult. Instead, Nolan placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder. You did the right thing, Nolan said softly. Julian, call the FBI and call the producers of the show. Tell them I'll be joining the interview. The night of the interview, the studio in Hudson Yards was electric with tension. Liam sat in the makeup chair, preening. He felt like a king again. He had a suit provided by the publisher, and he had practiced his sad, victimized face in the mirror for hours. 5 minutes to air, Mr. Sterling, a producer called out. Liam walked onto the set. The lights blinded him. He sat opposite the host, adjusting his tie. We're live in 3, 2... The interview began exactly as Liam had scripted it. He played the heartbroken husband perfectly. I loved her, Liam said, wiping a fake tear. I gave her everything, and she was plotting against me the whole time. She used my family's trust to destroy me. It was a hostile takeover from the inside. The host nodded gravely. And you claim in your book that she used illegal methods. Absolutely, Liam said, leaning forward. Insider trading, market manipulation. She's not a genius, Anderson. She's a criminal. That is a serious accusation, the host said. Which is why, in the interest of fairness, we have invited Ms. St. James to respond. Liam froze. His smile faltered. What? She's not here. Actually, the host gestured to the side of the stage. She is. Nolan walked out. She wasn't wearing a gown this time. She wore a sharp, navy blue suit that screamed authority. The audience gasped. Liam looked like he wanted to vomit. Nolan sat in the chair next to Liam. She didn't look at him. She looked directly at the camera. Ms. St. James, the host said, your ex-husband claims you stole his company. I bought his debt, Nolan corrected calmly. There is a difference. He claims you committed fraud. That is interesting, Nolan said, reaching into her blazer pocket. She pulled out the flash drive. Because I have evidence of fraud right here. But it's not mine. Liam's eyes darted to the drive. He recognized it. It was his backup drive, the one he kept in the safe at the condo. Where did you get that? Liam whispered, his voice cracking on the live microphone. This drive, Nolan continued, ignoring him, contains records of $12 million embezzled from Sterling and Co. over the last 3 years, money wired to shell companies controlled by Liam Sterling. The studio went dead silent. That's a lie, Liam shouted, standing up. She stole that. That's privileged information. It's evidence of a felony, Nolan said, her voice turning to steel. And since Aurora Holdings now owns the company you stole from, I have authorized a full forensic audit. The FBI is currently executing a search warrant at your condo in New Jersey. Liam's face drained of color. He looked at the wings of the stage. 2 federal agents were standing there, waiting. You can't do this, Liam stammered. This is a setup. No, Liam, Nolan said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were cold, hard, and final. This is the consequences of your own actions. You wanted the spotlight? You have it. She turned back to the host. I think this interview is over. Liam tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. He scrambled toward the back exit, but the agents were faster. They tackled him before he even reached the curtain. Live on national television, the former billionaire was handcuffed, read his rights, and dragged away, screaming about how unfair the world was. Nolan sat calmly in her chair, watching him go. She didn't smile. She just adjusted her cuffs. 3 months later. The scandal of Liam Sterling's arrest had finally faded. He was awaiting trial, denied bail due to being a flight risk. The tell-all book was cancelled. Nolan stood on the balcony of a vineyard in Tuscany. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. Julian walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You okay? he asked, resting his chin on her shoulder. I am, Nolan said, leaning back into him. I was just thinking. About him? No, Nolan smiled. About us. About the future. Speaking of the future, Julian said, reaching into his pocket, I have a merger proposal I'd like to discuss. Nolan turned around. Julian was holding a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a ring, not a giant, gaudy diamond like the one Liam had bought to show off, but a rare, vintage emerald. Unique. Timeless. Real. Nolan St. James, Julian said softly. I don't want your company. I don't want your status. I just want you. Will you marry me? Nolan looked at the man who had stood by her when she was plotting revenge, and who stood by her now that she had found peace. Yes, she whispered. I will. As they kissed, the sun dipped below the horizon. Far away in New York, the name Sterling was being scrubbed off a building. But here, in the quiet of the Italian countryside, a new legacy was just beginning. Nolan had signed the divorce quietly. She had arrived in a jet. She had burned her past to the ground. But in the end, her greatest victory wasn't revenge. It was happiness. And that is the story of how the ghost of Sterling Manor became the Queen of Wall Street. It's a reminder that you should never underestimate someone just because they're quiet. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's just the calm before the storm. What did you think of Nolan's revenge? Did she go too far, or did Liam and Eleanor get exactly what they deserved? And honestly, would you have given Eleanor that check at the end? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and twists, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next drama. We have a crazy story coming up next week about a cheating husband who realized too late that his wife was the daughter of a mafia boss. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.